Djibouti City is the capital of Djibouti, a small, arid, and rocky country located on the coast of the Horn of Africa. The surrounding air hums with the sounds of Arabic, French, Afar, and Somali languages. But if you pay a little attention, you will hear words from many other languages: English, Mandarin, Japanese, Italian. Just a few kilometers outside the city, you will witness something that is impossible to see anywhere else in the modern world. On your right, the French tricolor flag might catch your eye, reminding you of the country's colonial past. A little further away flies the Stars and Stripes of the United States, above Camp Lemonnier, America's only permanent military base on African soil. Looking toward another horizon, you will see China's massive, modern, and fortress-like naval base, with its red flag featuring 5 glowing yellow stars. And all around these are the rising sun flag of the Japanese forces, the insignia of the Italian military, and even the presence of Spanish and Saudi troops. America, China, France, Japan, Italy, the military forces of the world's most powerful and rival nations are neighbors here. They have established their bases in a country with an area of just 23,200 square kilometers, less than 1/6 the size of Bangladesh, and which has almost no natural resources. No oil, no gas, no valuable minerals. But why? How did this tiny country, practically devoid of natural resources, become an indispensable meeting ground for the world's most powerful armies? What geographical blessing and political factors brought Djibouti to this unique position and situated amidst some of the world's most dangerous regions? Is hosting so many rival powers on its soil a masterstroke for Djibouti, or a terrible gamble? We will try to find the answers to all these complex geopolitical and strategic questions in today's episode. The core secret of Djibouti's incredible importance lies not in any complex political theory, but in a single word: geography. Djibouti's greatest and practically only natural resource is its location. Location, location, location. This real estate maxim perhaps applies to no country better than Djibouti. Djibouti is situated right at the mouth of the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. In Arabic, Bab-el-Mandeb means the Gate of Tears, derived from its narrow and dangerous waterways. This strait connects the Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden, which is essentially the only maritime route connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean. Almost all maritime trade between Asia and Europe via the Suez Canal, located between Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula, passes through the Red Sea. This means that every container ship heading from Asia to Europe, every oil tanker going from the Middle East to Europe, and every cargo ship traveling from Europe to Asia must pass through the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. Approximately 30,000 ships pass through this strait every year, accounting for about 12% of total global maritime trade, and roughly 10% of the world's total oil trade happens through here. If for any reason this strait were to close, ships would have to circumnavigate the entire African continent via the Cape of Good Hope, adding thousands of kilometers and several weeks to their journey. This would result in a severe crisis for the global economy. Therefore, any power that can control or at least monitor the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait effectively controls a major global trade choke point. Djibouti's 18-kilometer-long coastline is located on the southern shore of this strait. For any country, there is hardly a better place to monitor this waterway. If a country establishes its naval base here, it can easily ensure the maritime security of this region, or, if it chooses, pose a threat to this trade route. Centered entirely around this extraordinary geographical location, Djibouti has built its entire geopolitical and economic strategy. They have turned their soil into an invaluable asset, which the major global powers are eager to rent. Djibouti's strategic importance has multiplied not only because of its geographical location, but also due to the severe instability of its surrounding region. Djibouti is often referred to as an oasis of stability in a sea of instability. A glance at its neighboring countries reveals just how accurate this analogy is. Located right to the south of Djibouti, Somalia has been synonymous with civil war, state failure, and anarchy for the past 3 decades. Since the fall of Siad Barre's government in 1991, the country has been divided among various warlords. It was within this power vacuum that organizations like Al-Shabaab and the Somali pirates, who terrorized the Gulf of Aden, were born. Due to this endless instability, no foreign power can even think of establishing a military base and operating inside Somalia. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait, just a few kilometers away, lies Yemen. Since 2014, a devastating civil war has been raging in Yemen, which has turned into a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This country currently faces one of the world's most horrific humanitarian crises. On the other hand, to the west of Djibouti is Ethiopia, and to the north is Eritrea. Bitter enmity and border conflicts have persisted between these two countries for decades. Recently, Ethiopia's internal Tigray War has destabilized the entire Horn of Africa region. Additionally, Ethiopia is a landlocked country and more than 95% of its maritime trade is conducted through the ports of Djibouti. So to speak, Djibouti has become the economic lifeline of this region. Amidst these extremely chaotic and conflict-ridden countries, Djibouti has maintained incredible political stability since gaining independence in 1977. Although it is not an ideal democracy and only 2 presidents have ruled the country since 1977, they have managed to keep internal conflicts and ethnic divisions under control. This very stability has made Djibouti an invaluable asset. Whenever any Western power or international organization has wanted to conduct military, counter-terrorism, or humanitarian operations in this region, they have had no alternative to Djibouti as a safe, reliable, and functional base. Djibouti's geopolitical importance increased dramatically as a result of 2 major 21st-century crises: the post-9/11 War on Terror and the rise of Somali pirates. Both these events transformed Djibouti from a regional logistics hub into an indispensable operational base for the world's major military powers. After 9/11, the administration of then US President George W. Bush declared a global war on terror. One of their primary goals was to eradicate al-Qaeda and its affiliated organizations. The Horn of Africa and Yemen, where groups like Al-Shabaab and AQAP were active, became a crucial front in this war. The United States needed a strategic base in this region to operate its special forces, drones, and surveillance aircraft. Djibouti was the ideal location for this. Its political stability and proximity to Yemen and Somalia made it a perfect launchpad for America. In 2002, the United States established the Combined Joint Task Force, Horn of Africa, in Djibouti. They leased an old base from the French named Camp Lemonnier. Initially, this was a temporary arrangement, but over time its importance grew. Today, Camp Lemonnier is America's only permanent and largest military base on African soil. Around 5,000 American troops and personnel are stationed here. It is one of the main hubs for US drone operations across Africa and the Middle East. From here, drone strikes are launched against suspected groups in Yemen and Somalia. It is also a vital hub for US Special Forces training and operations. For this base, the United States pays Djibouti approximately $63 million in rent every year. In the mid-2000s, attacks by Somali pirates in the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean reached a horrific level. Armed with modern weapons, they began hijacking large oil tankers and container ships, extorting billions of dollars in ransoms. This piracy threatened to sever one of the main arteries of global trade. To combat this crisis, almost all major global naval powers, including the European Union, NATO, China, Russia, India, and Japan, sent their warships to this region for anti-piracy patrols. This massive international naval operation required a coastal base, ports, and logistical support. Once again, Djibouti was the only logical and safe alternative. The European Union and other countries began using Djibouti's ports to resupply their ships, refuel, and give their sailors a place to rest. As part of these anti-piracy operations, Japan established a military base on foreign soil for the first time since World War II, and that place was Djibouti. Similarly, Italy and Spain also established their own smaller military presences in Djibouti. However, on Djibouti's geopolitical chessboard, the most dramatic and game-changing move came from Asia's rising superpower, China. For decades, China had been expanding its economic and diplomatic influence in Africa. They are Africa's largest trading partner, investor, and lender. But until 2017, China did not have any formal overseas military base. That year, however, China changed its strategy. Because, firstly, China's economy is heavily dependent on imported energy, especially Middle Eastern oil. Almost all of this oil reaches China via the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait. Additionally, as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, China's trade with Africa and Europe travels along this route. To protect this crucial supply line from the threat of pirates or any other power, China needed a permanent naval presence. Secondly, millions of Chinese citizens are engaged in various projects and businesses across Africa. During the 2011 Libyan civil war, China had to launch a massive and complex operation to evacuate nearly 36,000 of its citizens. From this experience, China realized that to protect its citizens on foreign soil, a military base was an absolute necessity. Thirdly, as a global power, having a worldwide military presence, like the United States, is a vital symbol of power. Establishing a foreign naval base was an unequivocal declaration of China's transition into a blue water navy, a navy capable of operating in deep oceans and a showcase of its military capabilities on the global stage. To fulfill all these objectives, China chose Djibouti. After lengthy negotiations, in 2017, China inaugurated its first overseas military base in Djibouti. This Chinese base is no ordinary logistics hub. It is a massive and heavily fortified naval fortress located near the Dorale port. It is just a few kilometers away from the US base, Camp Lemonnier. This base features a deep water port where any type of warship, including China's aircraft carriers, can drop anchor. It houses underground facilities, helipads, and accommodations for thousands of troops. Meanwhile, the establishment of this Chinese base in Djibouti marked an incredibly crucial moment in 21st century geopolitics because it represents a direct challenge to Washington. For the first time, the United States and China, two rival superpowers, have the opportunity to observe each other's military activities from such close quarters. US military officials have frequently expressed concerns that espionage against their operations might be conducted from the Chinese base. Djibouti has now effectively turned into a new battleground for the US-China Cold War. Of course, one element is often overlooked in this geopolitical equation: the fact that Djibouti itself is no passive spectator. The congregation of the world's powerful nations on its soil is no accident. Rather, it is the result of the highly astute and calculated foreign and economic policies of Djibouti's longtime ruler, President Ismail Omar Guelleh. Guelleh and his predecessor realized that their country's lack of natural resources could be their greatest strength. They have no oil or mineral wealth for major powers to fight or plot over. Their only asset is their strategic location, and they have turned this position into a lucrative geopolitical real estate business. Djibouti collects hefty rents from each country for establishing bases on its soil. It is estimated that the United States pays about $63 million annually, France around $35 million, and China nearly $20 million in rent. Although the actual figure of China's agreement has been kept secret, this rent forms a massive chunk of Djibouti's national budget and is one of the primary drivers of the country's economy. Not just rent, these bases contribute to Djibouti's economy in many other ways. Numerous job opportunities have been created for local Djiboutians at these bases. The thousands of foreign troops and personnel stationed at the bases shop in local markets, eat at restaurants, and rent houses, which also bolsters the local economy. On the other hand, the countries establishing bases often invest in various development projects in Djibouti to project soft power. For instance, China has financed the construction of a modern railway connecting Djibouti with Ethiopia and a new international airport. The biggest advantage of Djibouti's policy is security. When you have the permanent military presence of countries like the United States, China, France, and Japan on your soil, you effectively become one of the safest countries in the world. Any external power would think 10 times before attacking Djibouti, because doing so would mean clashing with almost all the major global powers. Similarly, the internal stability of the country also becomes intertwined with the interests of these nations, providing a sort of international umbrella of protection for Guelleh's regime. Of course, Djibouti's strategy is not entirely risk-free. Critics say that Djibouti has rented out its sovereignty and has effectively become a rentier state. If a conflict were to erupt between the United States and China, Djibouti could become the first victim of that clash. Furthermore, there is the fear that the presence of thousands of foreign troops might negatively impact the local culture and social fabric. However, up to this point, Djibouti has been walking this dangerous tightrope with great skill. By not leaning entirely toward any single power, they are trying to maintain good relations with everyone. In 21st century geopolitics, strategic location can become a far more valuable asset than oil or gold. Djibouti has demonstrated how even a small, resource-poor country can become a major player on the world stage by making the right moves. On the surface, Djibouti's gamble is a success. They have turned their geographic curse into an incredible blessing. But when the world's most powerful and rival armies sit down to play chess in your backyard, there is always the risk of a single wrong move that could flip the entire board. Djibouti now stands at the epicenter of that complex and dangerous game, the future course of which may just determine the balance of power in the 21st century.